Module number 11, rehearsals and sound checks. In this section, we're going to discuss some best practices in approaching your rehearsals and including the sound check, which is honestly one of the most important parts of your rehearsal. I love this photo. This is kind of what I looked like when I was in high school and in college, trying to have the garage band, the rock band setting. And I'll just say this, it's really emblematic, symbolic of what many groups kind of see themselves as. A lot of fun, goofing off, having a good time. But typically garage bands don't last because there's not the organization that's needed. They don't have the structure, the leadership required to be successful. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So like I said, garage band or praise band, what's your goal? Is it just to have a good time and jam out and rock out? This is very similar to what I kind of grew up hanging around with and playing a part in. I played in multiple different bands, jazz bands, worship bands, rock and roll, and some other styles that we weren't even sure what we were playing. But the point is there are many types of groups, and cliche garage bands don't normally last because they don't have the structure they need to make it last. You can see a difference here between this and just having a goof off time and having fun rocking out to what I would consider a very structured setting. You know, you could critique what this looks like and what it may sound like, but definitely would argue it's a lot more organized than the average teenager college band thrown together in a garage. And we should take it seriously. It should be a big deal because we're doing it for the glory of God. We're doing it in the worship context of the local church. So, in the second picture, you saw a more typical praise band team setting where multiple different genders, ages, backgrounds, and skill levels, I'm sure. In most churches, we've got many different types of varieties of abilities that need direction. And within this diversity of an average praise band, they're going to need some guidance, you know. They're going to need some direction. They're going to need some structure to be successful, especially with the variety. Here's some examples of different instruments that you have to be aware of. A microphone, the guitars, instruments, the drums. You know, when you're rehearsing these different things, this next point here, I think it's really important to know when your start and end times take place, and I misspelled that there, but the fact that you need to start on time. And if your rehearsal starts at 9 o'clock, you need to be there 15 minutes prior as a team member. The average team member, like a vocalist or a guitar player, instrumentalist, need to be there at minimum 15 minutes early. And with the head leader, the worship leader, you need to be there an hour prior because there's so many things that take place and required to get set up and rolling. If you're on the tech team, I recommend 30 minutes prior to get everything up and running and turned on. And so if we arrive early, we're valuing the rest of the team's time. I think text and call reminders are helpful in getting people there and being there early. And we live in a busy world. People need to be help staying on task and on time. It's just a reality. People need to be able to get things on time. But I would start the sound check process. Like I said, there's so many different instruments, so many different inputs for the sound guy. I would start that 10 minutes before the rehearsal starts. This is to make sure the microphones, especially the vocalist, are ready to go. The instruments aren't too loud, all the things. And the temptation for many worship bands and worship teams is to just go with the flow of what we've done every single week, and we don't need to change anything because it's always the same, no big deal. Well, that 1 week that you run late and you're running behind, you end up having issues. You have technical issues. You have things. And this is why the tech team shows up early to test things and fix stuff beforehand. But during this sound check, you may have issues. You may have problems. So you need 10 minutes to find out what those problems are and get them fixed. Because when time starts, you need to start your rehearsal, your run-through. What I would do after you check your vocals first, then guitars, keyboards, other instruments, percussion last, because you're going to need to mix those instruments under the vocals. I'm not saying to where you can't hear them. I promise you, I'm a huge fan of instruments. However, the most important thing to be heard is the vocals because it carries the message. It carries the truth of the songs being sung. And most importantly, your congregation can't sing if they can't hear the melody, if they can't hear the rhythm and the things that they're supposed to be following along with. The instruments are support. They're an accompaniment to that. So the way you mix during the sound check requires that setup. So you run through a short portion of the songs, or even just one song or a couple songs, just to get a feel for and get a balance after you've checked each microphone and make sure there's a good balance. Make sure everyone can hear what they need to hear on the stage volume, and the stage volume is appropriate, meaning it's not too loud or overwhelming. During the rehearsal, this time needs to be short. You need to prioritize your rehearsal sequence, not necessarily in the order of the service. If you know that song number 3 in the service is the most challenging song and the one y'all had the most issues during your prior rehearsal, you need to hit that song first. And there are times I've had rehearsals where I didn't even get to run through all the songs, especially the morning of or the evening of, just before the service. Like, we've already practiced the other songs. I'm going, hey, this song, we had issues last time. Let's run through this one more, Let's spend more time on this. It's the most important one, and time is of the essence, right? So prioritize your rehearsal sequence based off of the need. Include an order of service for each member and volunteers so they can follow and look ahead and stay with you as you go along, and they can see the flow of the service. Sometimes certain songs need more attention. Like I said, you may spend majority of your time on one song because it's just the roughest of the bunch that you have. But expect your team members to show up prepared in practice. This saves a ton of time during your rehearsals. Make sure, like we talked about Planning Center before, make sure they spend time on Planning Center, the app, the music stand app, all those different things to make sure they're ready to roll before rehearsal. Instrumentalist, vocalist, everyone. Everyone needs to be rehearsed before they show up. During the rehearsal, there should be little to no issues or mistakes on behalf of the musicians and instrumentalists. If anything, we're already practiced and prepared ahead of time, and that run-through is that last final hoorah before the service begins to make sure everything flows correctly. Parts should be learned. Words should be memorized. The back screen is not your saving grace. It's an assistance. It's not everything. It's a confidence screen, as I've heard it's called before. I personally recommend having a rehearsal on a different day prior to your worship service, and then include a short morning of service run-through rehearsal, meaning 15, 20 minutes at most, to run through parts or just one song, just to make sure everything flows like it needs to. But have a dedicated rehearsal prior to that day of the service. This rehearsal on a different day allows your team to focus on the things and polish up the areas that need to be worked on. Just so often I see churches, praise teams do rehearsals the day of, and they're about to play the song that morning, and it's not ready to roll. It's not to the quality it needs to be. You need to have a dedicated rehearsal prior to that to work out those things, to get through those issues. And then the morning of or the evening of the service, you are prepared. You're ready to go. During each rehearsal or run through, you should quickly walk through any potential flow or logistics, talking about transitions in between and lights coming down and different things. That's what the rehearsal's for. Do everything you can to not get stuck on one song for too long. Keep the ball moving. I think it's a danger that we have is to get focused on one song and you realize you used your entire time on that one song when you should have been working on the other songs as well. So make sure to keep moving. Don't get stuck working on just one song. If you are truly having issues with the song element, Don't hesitate to cut it from the service. If you can't seem to get it figured out, just make it another week. Push it back another week. Find another song you can rework in the service. It's not worth dedicating your entire rehearsal for one song. It's not worth everyone's time or efforts to rehash the same thing over and over again, especially if your team just did not rehearse like they were supposed to ahead of time. And you as the worship leader or the tech volunteer, you should be all on board, all prepared, ready to go. So closing out the rehearsal, always remember to thank your team. This is so incredibly important. So often they don't hear anything from you unless there's something negative. And I hate to say it's not because we don't care, but because we're so focused, we're so engaged in the now and what's going on now. And there's a lot of things to focus on now. The squeaky wheel gets the grease, whatever's on fire gets put out. But take the time to thank them at the end of your rehearsal each week. Work with them as they tear down any equipment or setup. Don't just walk off the stage and expect them to do everything on their own. Be a team player as the worship leader or tech team. Make sure that the worship leader and tech team leader touch base following each rehearsal to make sure they got any logistics ready to roll. That includes all of your tech booth, but if you've got someone who's over the whole booth, your main communicator, the worship leader needs to communicate with them. This buffer and times allow for working through issues while still thanking your team for gifts and their time. You're allowing time of discussion, fellowship, but also being a part of their life and engaging with them in discussion. But it also allows you and your team to work through issues that may need to be worked through. So give yourself the time, but be efficient with your rehearsals. And I appreciate it. Thank y'all.